How's it going, everybody? Today, upon request, we're going to tie up a 6 dungeon. This is Kelly Galloup's pattern. However, I kind of make a little bit of modification to this thing here. We're going to tie one that's red and black. Try to keep the colors to where you folks can see them just fine. Starting off with the tail, we're going to use some marabou. Nimrod's Bait and Tackles, where I get this marabou from. Next up, we've got some black wire for counter wrapping that hackle to keep it on there and make it last longer. We've got some red ice dubbing. No idea where this came from. It was given to me. It's not even in the original bag, so not sure the brand on this. And then we're going to use for our hackle, neck hackle, not ideal, but for example purposes, works just fine. We're going to throw a little red crystal flash in there as well. For the deer hair, we have Wapsi deer belly hair in black. Good stuff. For the thread, starting with the body, will be black UTC 140 denier. And for the head, for the deer hair part, it will be Vivus gel spun thread GSP 200. That's going to be 200 denier there. So for our joint, for our section, in between tying the hooks together, we're going to use some backing. It's basically thread. We're not going to be throwing something this size at, toothy critters, northern pike, tiger muskie, and such. This will be good for largemouth bass, big browns, even smaller browns. Just trout eat this, and bass. So they're not going to be super hard on this backing. I like the backing. It flows well. It ties in good. It lays down flat. The glue melds into it well. Just everything about it, I like it. Now down to the nitty gritty. All 3 of these items I sell on my website. If you guys are interested, you're not going to find them better priced anywhere. I buy in bulk and resell. Buy overseas directly from a factory. We have a medium sized 4.6 millimeter dumbbell eye in red. Those are listed on my website. Leading hook is going to be a 2/0. What is listed on my website as a PPR, a popper hook. And then this one here, I believe it's CHGR changer hook. This one is a number 2. All right, so without further ado, let's get some thread wraps in and go to town. When I lay down this thread, I just want to build a little bit of a base. I'm not trying to do anything fancy. I'm not trying to build anything specific. Just laying down a light base. We're not trying to do anything too extravagant here. All right, so we got a couple tufts here. What you're going to want to do for the tail, I do not like doing this, but it's the fastest, simplest way. Pinch the tips, stroke everything else rearward. You're going to have uneven sides to that. When that happens, I'll fold the shorter side back up, make it all even like so. Here's a little tip. Any of you that haven't tied, not figured this out, I use nail clippers when I trim stuff like this because watch, I'm going to trap some of these fibers of the feather. And look, not one of them falls off. All it did was cut through that main vein on that feather. So I'm going to dampen my fingers. I got a cup of water here just for that. I'm going to get these all straightened out, lay them out on my leg, and get one more. That one's pretty fluffy, So I typically, sometimes I'll do 3. It depends on how thick the marabou is I'm using. But I like to have, especially on the larger ones, I really like to have a fluffy tail. That tail is what gives that back end the kick. So if you notice, that's real thick, and that's dampened. So measurement wise, to be honest, I just eyeball stuff. I picture it in my head, what it's going to look like. I've tied enough of these things. I have a really good idea. We're going to take a loose wrap, 2 loose wraps, cinch, kind of push it all down, make sure it's kind of flattened out a little bit, because we don't want to build a major bulk on top of the hook shank. All right, get a couple good solid wraps, kind of snug it down, then pull everything as back and as tight as you can, wrap rearward till you get to that bend, and then come back to the front. Take my handy dandy anadromous, however you want to say it, scissors, cut that off. Make sure it's got a good taper, because if it doesn't, it's going to give you fits. Tie all that down. Come back. Now I'm going to tie in my red crystal flash. There are multiple ways you can do this. I do it the slow way. I like to conserve as much materials as I can, so I'll put the 2 butt ends together on both sides, tie in one side, tie in the other side, and then when I trim this, I have enough to do multiple more flies instead of just having a little short piece laying there. And when I trim these, I stagger them. I'll trim one about half the length of the tail, and on the other side, I'll trim it the length of the tail. Same thing for this piece, except opposing. So close side, length of the tail, far side, half the length of the tail. Good to go. Now we're going to tie in our wire. Wire's wire, folks. Get it wherever you can. I get mine from Hobby Lobby. It's cheap, does the same thing. The only negative I'm going to say about the wire from Hobby Lobby is that it's pretty messy. It comes on a not so great spool, so it's kind of messy to deal with once you take it off. What I do is I keep my spare spools of thread, and I will just take the wire off the spools that they come in or come on from Hobby Lobby, and I will re-wrap them on my own little spool. We're going to tie a whip finish, not necessary but helpful. This is just to keep things out of the way. And we're going to get to this mystery dubbing I've got here. So you won't be able to see this. I've showed before in some of my videos how I lay out dubbing loop material right here on my leg. I'm just going to pull some fibers out and line them up. Take my high dollar material clip, pick this stuff up, split my thread, slide it in, trap it, spread it out. Over time, you'll get a feel for this part, just kind of figuring out how much you need, how much of this this loop needs to be filled, the distance, and how thick. I actually do mine fairly thin with material. Then you're just going to spin her up. I don't even pick this out, brush it, nothing. I just spin it up. I will pick out the marabou if it gets trapped. And after that, I start wrapping, because after the fact, I will brush this and fluff it out before I put rubber legs on. When you get towards the front, I like to kind of pull them rearward so they don't bulk up on the head of this thing. Because you want to kind of keep this this back eye clear. You don't want to get too much stuff piled up on it. You will run into crowding the hook eye if you do. If you notice, I got a pretty good little gap there in that hook eye. I can fill with wraps. Trap this, 2, maybe 3 wraps behind it, and I like to fold it over, pull it all back, get a couple good solid wraps in there, build that up nice and sturdy. Trim this off. Oops, missed it. All right, so now we're going to take our hackle, tie this in. You can be as precise or unprecise as you want. I will take my thumb and pin it and take a couple good wraps. That way it stays flat, because if you don't, it'll fold. And if it folds, it doesn't wrap like it should. Especially with this neck hackle, it's gonna fight me. It's gonna try to fight me doing this. So, with the way I've got this done, we're gonna reverse, all right? So I'm gonna bring this to me on top and towards you on the bottom. Get one solid wrap all the way around right here, and then start working back. Doesn't have to be perfect. They don't have to be even or pretty, just tight wraps. That's important, because now you're going to take your wire and counter wrap. So I'm going to go towards you on the bottom and towards me on the top, and that will counter wrap that hackle, trap it. If it breaks, it'll hold it in there just a little bit longer. Plus, it helps hold that dubbing in there. I like to wiggle as I do this to keep from trapping too many. You're going to trap some, but I try not to trap too many of them. I like to get 2 wraps behind the wire, counter wrap it, come back towards me. I've showed this before. Get 2 wraps behind, go back to the original direction, get 2 behind, helicopter it off. Anybody that knows me knows I'm not a major fan of glue, but it's quite a necessity for patterns like this. We're gonna just put a little on the thread, spread it out. Try to get the wraps in before it beads up on the thread, and definitely don't let it get on your feather. That will cause all kinds of no goodness. So get you a couple good wraps, cover that up. When you take this whip finish, you be on the ready, okay? Because it's gonna stick. 1, 2, let's get one more. That'll be good. Oh yeah, I like it. All right, so this is where I mentioned I will brush this out. Peak Fishing made this. I don't know that they carry it anymore. Super versatile little picking brush. Love it. So I'll just comb this out, rough it up real good. If you got any fibers trapped, just take your pick, pluck them out. Don't be afraid. You're not going to hurt the fly. And then again, we're going to take these fingernail clippers. Same thing. Trim that off. See how it didn't cut anything but that. That is the only thing that it cut. All right, so back end of this fly is done, ready to move on. We'll go to that 2/0 PPR hook that I sell. In case you can't tell, I'm plugging my website here. Guys, I got all kinds of stuff on there. If you haven't checked it out, go check it out. I don't sell junk. And if you guys have an issue with something, you can message me directly and I will take care of it. Same thing with the thread here. We're just tying it down. We're not trying to build any kind of base, because we're going to build a base with all the materials that we put on this bad boy. The reason for this base is I'm going to go up to about 1/4 inch from the hook eye. The reason I build this base is because if it was a slick hook, just a plain slick hook, this would slide around. It wouldn't stay on there right, okay? So with this thread, it's rough. You hear that? It's got a little roughness to it. All right, so on this, I'm going to catch it, get it on there, put it where I want it. I want it kind of on the bottom quarter of this, the first one, and it'll be the opposite for the top. But it leaves a vertical loop on there. So when I tie these in, I do that because the vertical loop will keep those hooks in line with each other. Instead of having it twist and get offset, they stay vertical, so the fly keeps the same shape and size. The hooks stay in the same place. All right, y'all, don't judge me for my beads. I actually get my beads from Hobby Lobby. We'll just go with these purplish colored ones. They're kind of close to red. All right. We're going to take these 3, put them on. 1, 2, 3. And then we want to make sure whenever we go to put on this other hook that the hook point is facing down. So before I do such, I'm going to take this Sharpie and, there's dropped the bead. Take this Sharpie and color a couple inches of this backing. That's why I like the white backing, because I can change the color of it to red. Now we're going to take our beads, feed them on here. 1, 2, 3. All right, so we got our beads. Now this is important. This will make a difference in the way your fly is presented. If I were to take and do it like this, the hook point's going to ride up. I want that hook point down in line with this hook point, right? So I've got my beads. I'm going to take and feed this from the bottom of the hook. See the points here? From the bottom of the hook up and then back through the beads. And when you tie this down, make sure that it doesn't twist, because it can twist on you. Okay, to check if it's twisted, just pull tight. If that hook point goes down like it's supposed to, same line, you're good. All right, so I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to give it just a little bit of a leeway for them beads to have a little movement. I don't want it all the way up against this hook, because then it makes that fly stiff as a board, right? So if I leave a little bit of a gap, like so, Look at the difference in that, right? So I'm going to trap this however you see fit. I like to get just a couple wraps on it, then snip it off. And then I'll tie it all down, make sure it stays on that opposite, the top quarter of that hook shank. Pull it back. Once you get a couple good wraps, pull back tight on it. It ties down a lot better when you do that. A couple wraps. Now, I have a rubber band wrapped around the stem of my vise. I'll take it, hook it on this hook, and it keeps everything pulled out of the way. Before I go any further, again, with the stuff I don't like, I hate messing with this, but we're going to use it. Super glue. Just coat the top of this. You don't have to cover the entire hook shank. Just make sure it's spread out. It doesn't have any big globs in any spots. You can do this however you want, but myself, I will take a pair of tweezers to pull this front tag down to tie it in because I don't like super glue on my fingers. Okay. Now we're just going to add a little more thread base, try to even it up some. And then we'll have to sit and let this cure for just a minute before we tie this marabou on, because if you don't, you're going to get super glue everywhere. But while we're waiting, we'll go ahead and lay out our marabou. That should be enough time. Got our marabou. You don't want this marabou to go past these feather tips because then it will get intertwined with them. You want it to be right at the front. All right, so you're going to measure that out, pinch it, and tie it in. Me personally, I like to try and spread these out a little bit. It doesn't always work. I feel like it makes it look a little better in the water. You kind of cover up that joint a little better. Then just pull them rearward. Get you a couple good wraps, like so. Get you a couple good ones going forward. Snip off your excess. Add an angle. Always add an angle. Always tapered whenever your time flies. Anything you cut off, always taper it. Because if you don't, it's going to build a little hump there that you cannot get the thread over unless you build a dam below it. And you don't want that. Okay, back to the wire. Tie that in real well. So I'm going to spin my thread now to get rid of some of that tautness in it. And I'm going to make my dubbing loop. Come back just like I did. Before I do anything, I'm going to put my dubbing loop spinner on that loop. Tie my whip finish. Get this out of the way with my bobbin cradle. Now I'm going to lay out my dubbing. always remember, everybody, when you're tying these flies to take fishing, the most important thing is the durability, okay? Making them pretty is one thing. The durability of your fly matters more than anything. So the less, just because it's not the prettiest fly in your box doesn't mean the fish won't eat it, right? As long as it has the right shape and movement and color, they'll eat it. Just always remember that. Unless you are tying to sell. If you're tying to sell flies, make them pretty. Nothing I despise any more than somebody selling flies that look like doo-doo. All right. Always remember to take your little rubber band off before you do this part, because if you don't, well, you end up in a bind. These little cheap hair clips, they come in packs of however many I've got here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Packs of 8. You can get them in packs of 8. They're like $4. They come in handy for stuff like this. Now, I will do the same thing. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. I heard the saying one time, all streamers are basically just two woolly boogers tied together. And that's kind of what it is. This is just two woolly boogers tied together. So if you see that you may be running out of material, if you're not going to notice, this is one of the things I was talking about. If it's for you and you're taking it fishing, it doesn't have to be pretty. It's just got to catch a fish. So I took larger steps with that and didn't get everything super compact and tight with that dubbing loop. And it's going to be a little gap here between my dumbbell eyes and this material, but I don't care because it'll pretty much be covered up. Okay. Take our hackle, get our butts together, rub them butts together nice and good, get them even. Again, I hold them down with my thumb to keep them from sliding and flipping sideways, because they will. Cut them off as close as you can. Fingernail clippers they cut stuff so close, it's hard to beat. Get a solid wrap all the way around and then start working back. Doesn't have to be pretty by any means, it's just got to get there. Okay, we have arrived. Take this wire, counter wrap, same as the last section. Wiggle it as you go. If you see it trapping a big chunk of fibers, just back up and wiggle it. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Now here on this head, you got to really make sure you don't build too much of a hump somewhere. So I like to go past that little lump that I already have from the backing in there. 2 wraps, counter. I like to make this part of the taper going down off of that backing, because then it gives it a good even taper down, even without putting any extra thread wraps. It's a good even taper down right here. So now we're going to cover it all up, because if you get too much of a decline on the head of this, when you tie your dumbbell eyes in, it will kick your butt. All right, so the particular pattern says that the dumbbell eyes go on the bottom. Me personally, when I tie these, it depends on who or what I'm tying them for. If you're fishing a stream that's got a lot of hang-uppy rock or hang-uppy bottoms, like sticks, brush, and such, you might be ripping this through there, even some grass or something, you can flip it. All right, so instead of tying everything the way I did, you can tie it to where it goes the other way, right? So you can tie the dumbbell eyes on top and it'll just rotate everything where the hook point is up. But for the example, not to disrespect Sir Galloup, I'm going to tie this in the proper way. I go 3 cross wraps this way, 3 cross wraps this way, pull them snug, and those eyes shouldn't move unless I move them. And I'm going to line this up even with that hook eye. From here, I'm going to go, horizontal wraps around that, 2 good ones, come all the way back around to the front. And when you tie this part in, this is where it will cinch, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can do however many you want. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now around and around, cinch, round and round, cinch. Tip: whenever you're doing this, be careful. If you're using gel spun thread or heavier than 140 denier, you can basically sever your dumbbell eyes if they're lead. If they're brass or tungsten, disregard that. But lead dumbbell eyes, they can be severed. All right, so now we're going to tie in our, all right, we're good. We're going to tie in our rubber legs. Montana Fly Company, in my opinion, makes the best silicone or rubber legs in the book. Makes the best rubber legs in business. All right, so we're going to tie this in. Once you get a loose wrap on this, you can wiggle it around to where you want it. It doesn't have to be perfect on the front, just has to come out where it's supposed to on the side at the back. So I'm going to wrap this to where I want it. If you'll pull the legs as you wrap, it'll help cinch them down a little better. I've got a lot of experience with these rubber legs since I tie and sell. I used to, we'll see if I still do this winter, but I used to sell a lot of patch rubber legs, little ones, micros. Now, instead of trying to tie all that down and crowd my hook eye, I like for this to be on top and behind the thread. I don't know why I did it that way, but before I go any farther and crowd that hook eye, you don't want that because you're gonna need the room for the deer hair. I will take my small curved anadromous scissors and put the curve going upward, trim this as close as I can to prevent buildup around this hook eye, because that's going to matter when you tie down that deer hair. It's going to matter. So at this point, I'm done with my UTC flat waxed. 2, 3, 4, 5 is good. I'm going to tie it off with a whip finish, cut it off, and then we're going to go to this 200 denier gel spun Vivas. I start right at the back of the hook eye so that anybody that's ever tied with Vivas, you'll understand, but so that it doesn't slip out, this thread will, it'll slip right out if you're not careful. I'm going to cut that as close as I can. So this is how I get my tips, how I want them. A lot of people, I think, have trouble with this. We're going to use red for this collar, and on this pattern I only do a collar on the top. I feel like it looks really good, moves really good in the water this way. So that's how I tie this. You can do it however you want. I know a lot of people will do a collar all the way around. I'm not positive how Mr. Galloup does his, but how it's supposed to be, I've seen multiple different ways, but this is how I like to tie mine. I feel like they just look and move really good in the water like this. The goal of this fly is, I mean, obviously to mimic bait fish or, you know, other smaller fish in the river, but at the same time, this is a good pattern to throw in dingy water because it moves water. And if any of you have watched my video on lateral lines, you'll understand why that makes a difference. When you throw something that's pushing a lot of water, creates a disturbance in these fish. If it's within 20 feet of them, they'll know it's there. They don't have to see it, they'll feel it. All right, so again, good old anadromous hair stacker. This thing is massive. I can put my finger in there, no problem. We're gonna stack this hair, get these tips all nice and even. Look at that, beautiful. Now we're going to measure this out. I like this to be about 2/3 the length of the fly itself. I'm going to switch fingers, pinch it, 1, 2 loose wraps, and then you're going to kind of cinch, make sure it flattens out on top. You don't want it to roll, you want it to stay on top if you're going to tie it like I do. All right, so I'll get a wrap, and then I'll just wrap this around this dumbbell eye and let it hang. That way it's ready to rock and roll for the next step. And from here on, it's pretty simple. Trimming these can give some folks a fit, but I love trimming deer hair. You want to get all that under fur and short hair out. Now for me, I'm actually going to stack this. Make sure the butts are all nice and even when I tie this in. I like them to be it might take you a minute to get it even. There we go, that's pretty good. There's a few stragglers, but that's okay, we'll take them out. This doesn't have to be tight like a popper, you don't want that. So again, pretty even on those butts. They're not perfect, don't need to be. I'm going to do the same thing, pinch them right there where I want them. Take this off my dumbbell eye. 1, 2, wiggle as you go through. Same with that hackle, it keeps it from trapping any extra hair you don't want trapped. 2 loose wraps. Then I'm gonna come around and pinch the dumbbell eyes and pull. When I pull this and cinch it down, I'm gonna pull it forward and try to tuck it up under the dumbbell eyes here. Once I get that, wiggle this, try to keep it from trapping any hair if I can help it. Now I'm going to take a wrap in front of the deer hair behind the dumbbell eyes, all the way around, and then trap it or hang it on the dumbbell eye again. And then the next 2 stacks, you don't have to be as precise. You can just pull them out, stack them on there. The more experience you have, the more you'll understand and be able to gauge how much deer hair to use. But I can look at this right here and tell how much I'm gonna need. I need about a pencil. Because if I get much more than that, it's gonna pack it really, really tight in there. And I don't want it tight. Always, whenever you select the piece of deer hair that you're going to trim out, get just a little more than you need, because your girth will change after you comb it out. See, I took out some fibers and some fuzz. and we're pretty much size of a pencil. Now I'm going to pinch the butts, lay it down right in the center of them dumbbell eyes, and then pinch it atop those dumbbell eyes. And I'm just going to ignore that it's coming around that other side. I'm going to go underneath. Try not to get any of this red because it'll change the color of the head of this fly. We're not trying to blend it, so we want this to be all black. Get 1, 2, and cinch. I'm going to pull just a little bit so that it holds it in place and I can let go. Now I'm going to pinch these dumbbell eyes and the hair lightly and pull it rearward, and it tucks it up underneath there. Now I'm going to pull this red out of the way. You can trim it if you want to kind of get it out of the way. We have a malfunction here, that rubber band. There we go. All right. One more stack. Let's see how big it needs to be. A little bigger than a pencil. And I like to use the butt ends for the front and then for the back, because you can make it cleaner, and they are spongier, they're thicker, they're easier to trim. So when they're on the front of the head, they're flared out facing forward, they're easier to trim. If you have the tips sometimes can be stiff and hard to trim. All right, so we're gonna lay this in here. Just tie it down right in the middle. It ain't no big deal. Slip in there. 1, 2 loose wraps, and the same thing, we're gonna kind of pull rearward a little bit when we snug this up. Boom. All right, now I'll just take my finger, do like you're gonna do a spot on a deer hair bug, fan it out, get that hook eye exposed. I like to twist my thread. It helps with this part. It makes it go through there instead of trapping fibers. I'm gonna make one more good cinch before I do this. I'm gonna try to push everything back and keep it in its rightful area. Try not to like take a big chunk of the top and flip it down to the bottom. I wanna keep it all pushed the right direction. And I'm just gonna wiggle it as I clear that hook eye, or clear the deer hair to the hook eye. And you should come out with the hook eye exposed about like so. It'll make that a lot easier to tie that knot. Now for me, they do make tools for this. Myself, I use straws. I slit them right down the center, and you can gauge it to whatever size you want it, tie it in there. When I do this part, I'll pinch the hook eye, kind of pull back on that. I don't pull too hard on the first one because sometimes that lip on the hook eye will cut the thread. 1, 2, then I'll do a double. Another double. And then 2 more. This is what I'm talking about, this is what I was talking about earlier when I mentioned durability. I make sure that I've got enough knots in this that it's not gonna undo itself. Even if I accidentally break this thread while I'm pulling tight, it's not gonna fall apart. Trim that off. I think this is the part that kicks a lot of folks' behinds. All right, I forgot to trim this hackle back here. Look at that. I didn't have to fight with it or nothing, just cut it right out. Okay. That's good, that's good. I always like to take a comb and fluff my deer hair before I trim it. Gets any extra pieces out and untraps a lot that was trapped. And When I start the trim, I like to use the dullest razor blade I have on hand. I have a couple here, and I will just go straight in line with that hook eye to just completely expose it. That way I've got a good view of where it's at. I don't have to worry about dulling my blade on the hook eye. If you'll just butt this blade up against it and kind of wiggle it side to side, it'll just trim it all out. Now I've got a good rounded head on this to start trimming. Now I'm going to get my sharp blade. I start on the bottom because I know where it needs to go for the dumbbell eyes. So I'll put it up against this hook eye and just push up till I get the taper that I want. And if you struggle trimming it, you can kind of roll this blade in your fingers a little side to side. Just be really careful. If you don't have calloused fingers, you're going to cut yourself. Like so. Got me a good, nice, rounded bottom to this. It's a little thicker than I wanted it to be, but we can always trim it down. With deer hair, you always do less than you think because you can take more off, but you can't put it back on. And it would be a shame to spend 30 minutes tying a fly that you have to start over on. Now this part just kind of comes with practice. You got to be careful when you're trimming this because you don't want to get into that collar back there. So I'll use the hook eye to start this side trim here. Roll it, roll it, roll it till I get up against that collar. Take my time so I don't mess it up. Same thing for this side. For me, I don't know about you guys, I always struggle with the opposing side when I trim. I have trouble getting it even, but you can always clean it up. Looks pretty dang good as it is. We're gonna trim it down just a little more because these are medium eyes, so we don't want too big of a head or it won't go down like it should. All right, got a good little taper going here, nice and round, bullet shaped, like a fish head. All right, it ain't gotta be pretty, it's just gotta catch a fish. Once I get this far, since it's on the vise, I'll go ahead and trim these legs. Since I only put one piece, one set of legs in, I'm going to trim them even with the base of the tail, which is pretty much the length of these rubber legs. So just clip. One of them disappeared. Where'd it go? Come back. Come back. Baby, come back. There we go. All right, now I'm gonna go through and trim out all these little stickers like this piece here. All these extra little pieces that just kind of in the way, which there weren't very many. All right, now we'll take it off the vise and trim out these eyes. So I've been talked to before about this, the eyes. I know a lot of people struggled with the eyes being covered. Well, when you have a good pair of scissors like this, you just lay them up against that dumbbell eye and cut around the corners at an angle. And magically, those eyes become visible. Voila. Now you can take a look at this thing. If you don't like how uneven or even it may be, actually uneven, if you don't like how uneven it is or you see some stragglers from the bottom, you can trim it, make it a little prettier. Again, this is just for looks. The fish don't care. Only people. And it's not the prettiest dungeon that I've ever tied, but it will catch a fish. There you guys go. There's you a SEX dungeon, Kelly Galloup style. Oh yeah, I forgot. There was one last thing I forgot to say. But before I do, take a good look at this dungeon. Ooh-wee. Oh, and the thing I forgot, y'all keep it fishy.